Jesus' divine glory, a claim of eternal oneness with God. Before the universe began, before the first spark of time, Jesus prayed, "Glorify me with the glory I had with you before the world began." Think about that for a moment. Who else but God could claim to share eternal glory with the Father? This isn't just a profound statement, it's a declaration that demands an answer. If Jesus isn't God, how do you explain this? Let's explore. In John 17:5, during his prayer to the Father, Jesus says, "And now, Father, glorify me in your presence with the glory I had with you before the world began." This isn't a casual request, it's a claim of eternal existence and oneness with God. Jesus isn't asking for something new. He's asking for the restoration of a divine glory he possessed before creation. This statement is a direct claim to pre-existence, eternality, and divine equality with God. Let's unpack this. Isaiah 42:8 declares, "I am the Lord, that is my name. I will not yield my glory to another or my praise to idols." God's glory is exclusive. He doesn't share it with anyone, angels, prophets, or kings. Yet here, Jesus claims to share in that very glory. If he isn't God, how does this not violate the fundamental truth of God's exclusivity? This theme of Jesus' divine glory is woven throughout Scripture. Hebrews 1:3 says, "The Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word." Jesus doesn't just reflect God's glory. He is the radiance itself. He perfectly embodies God's nature, power, and presence. How can this be true of anyone but God? Consider the broader narrative of Jesus' identity. Colossians 1:16-17 states, "For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together." These verses don't describe a mere human or created being. They describe the eternal creator and sustainer of all existence. If Jesus isn't God, how can he hold all things together? Let's take a closer look at John 1:1-3, which echoes Genesis. "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made." This passage reinforces the idea that Jesus, the Word, existed eternally with God and actively participated in creation. How could this be said of anyone other than God? But it doesn't stop with his pre-existence. Consider Philippians 2:6-7, which says, "Who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness." Jesus, though fully God, humbled himself by taking on human form. His prayer in John 17:5 isn't about gaining something new, it's about returning to the glory that was always his. Now let's reflect on the reaction of those closest to him. In John 20:28, Thomas, often called Doubting Thomas, sees the resurrected Jesus and exclaims, "My Lord and my God." Jesus doesn't rebuke him or correct him. Instead, he affirms Thomas's declaration. If Jesus isn't God, why would he accept this title without hesitation? Throughout the New Testament, Jesus receives worship in ways that are reserved exclusively for God. In Revelation 5:13-14, we see a heavenly vision where every creature in heaven, on earth, and under the earth declares, "To him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be praise and honor and glory and power, forever and ever." The Lamb, Jesus, shares in the worship directed at God. How can this be reconciled unless he is divine? Even Jesus' miracles point to his divine authority. In Mark 2:5-7, Jesus forgives the sins of a paralyzed man, prompting outrage from the religious leaders who ask, "Who can forgive sins but God alone?" Jesus not only forgives sins but heals the man to demonstrate his authority. Forgiving sins and healing aren't just acts of kindness, they're claims of divine power. Finally, Revelation 1:8 records Jesus saying, "I am the Alpha and the Omega, who is and who was and who is to come, the Almighty." The titles Alpha and Omega representing eternity and the Almighty belong to God alone. Yet here Jesus uses them for himself. If Jesus isn't God, how does he claim these titles without contradiction? Jesus' claim to share eternal glory with the Father is either the ultimate truth or the greatest blasphemy. There's no middle ground. If he isn't God, how does he claim the Father's glory, accept worship, and fulfill the prophecies that point to the Messiah as divine? How does he sustain the universe, forgive sins, and declare himself the Alpha and Omega? Skeptics, this is your moment to respond. If Jesus isn't God, how do you reconcile these claims? How does he stand unchallenged in his identity as the eternal creator and sustainer of all things? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's discuss this together. And if this challenged your thinking, subscribe. Here we confront life's deepest questions with boldness and honesty. So who is Jesus to you? Let's talk.